All right.
Good afternoon. It is. Yeah, not much. You can see you guys. Hope you had a good weekend. This is, of course, our class. We get the whole period. So we are going to be able to actually, carry on through what I planned for today, just in its fullest sense. And what I've got on the docket for today is what I think is pretty short. I've sort of targeted it to be about a 20-minute quick discussion here. We'll have some questions that we'll answer as we go through, but they're short. It's one page. There's only 5 or 6 questions. And like I said, I targeted it to be about a 20-minute discussion. So it's worked well with the periods where I've had the delay. I've actually been able to get through the sort of the most important part, I think, of today's discussion. And then with the time that we have left, I'd like to build off of what we're going to be talking about at the end of that and take a look just very, very quickly. This is the only day that we'll really give any time to it. To a short part of a clip from a documentary just simply called Prohibition. And it's from the same guy who made the Civil War documentary that we looked at first semester. And we'll also be using parts of his Vietnam documentary when we get back, probably for spring break. He's sort of the man when it comes to producing things, right? So I'm going to send around your questions for today. And while these are coming around, I wanted to say something just really quickly about what today is. Some of you may know that today, it's not a holiday. It's not a holiday. Today is midterm. And sorry to ruin your day if I did that. But hey, listen. I want to make 2 things perfectly clear when it comes to midterm. Okay, first things first. Make sure that you check your grade. It is updated with, I think, the exception of one assignment that is rather small in points, so it won't have a huge impact on your overall grade. But you guys as a class are doing really, really well, and I'm very proud of you for that. I thank you for that. But if you get on there and you feel like your grade is not where you want it to be, let's be clear. This is only the midterm. This is not the 9 weeks. This is not the semester. You have plenty of opportunities to get that grade boosted up. Ultimately, though, it's going to come down to whether or not you're willing to take advantage of the points that are made available to you. There's a lot of points in this class. I usually like to be at midterm somewhere in the 160, 170 range. Right now, we're at 168, so we're right there. So by the end of the 9 weeks, we'll be close to 350, and that's a lot of points. You have to take advantage of them, though. I think you guys know me well enough at this point. You have an expectation for this class. This is not a class where you're going to be able to show up, do nothing, and somehow still get an A+. Okay, you're going to have to actually earn the grade that you get. I'm not going to be a teacher who's going to sit back and just let you do that, and that be the expectation for when you come in here. I had a student here the other day that told me, I was going to ask you if we did anything, but I already know the answer. Of course we did something. We do things in here. It's like one of the best compliments I could ever get. Okay, so this year, next year in government, these are classes where you're going to have to show up. You're going to have to earn the grade. The points are going to be there. You got to make sure that you take advantage of them. Okay, and this is a good example. I'm still sort of shocked at how many students take zeros on these questions. Basically, you're here, you pay attention, you answer them. These are usually pretty good points for you. It boggles my mind to see students take zeros on them. Right? So let's get to this. Like I said, give me about 20 minutes, and we'll be through these.
Did not know who that was when I saw Melanie.
What?
Is this in class discussion?
Yeah.
I have a screen with you.
Dark.
All right. Hey, first things first, you don't need your Chromebooks today. Let's close those, please. Close those up, put those out of the way. All you need is the questions and a writing utensil. Only 6 of them. And I think they're going to be pretty obvious as we go through. Now, last week on Thursday, I had said that this was a time period, the 1920s, that was known by lots of different nicknames. And one of those we saw last week, the Roaring Twenties. Spent some time with the culture of that time period. I know you all went home this weekend and listened to nothing but old jazz. I know it. I know you did, Tim. And you wouldn't have gone except that you were listening to it. Tim's the man, right? Tim needs to be in the 20s. But anyway, hey. Now, hey, here's the deal, guys, though. That particular nickname was, I think, in general, pretty positive. A lot of fun music, a lot of fun dancing. You know, I know a lot of people were talking about they couldn't understand how that woman's legs moved that fast. I get it. But it was largely people having fun. All right? You know, I think we're going to look at the other side of the coin here to see that not everything in the 1920s was happy music, happy dancing. There was a lot of sort of the dark here. And that's, unfortunately, what we're going to cover today. These are 2 other nicknames by which the 1920s are often called. We're going to spend a lot of time on that one. Quick intro to that. And then, like I said, the video clip that we see once we're done will focus on that as well. All right? So let's get into this Red Scare thing. And this is going to be questions basically 1 through 4. 1 through 4 here we will cover on this slide, actually. And I don't know, this might be a term that you've heard of before. Do you guys read The Crucible junior year? Oh, okay. Well, but if you guys read The Crucible, or you read The Crucible and you remember anything about it, The Crucible is actually based on a time period in U.S. history called the Red Scare. It's sort of built around this guy, Joseph McCarthy, and him accusing everybody, it seemed like, of being a communist. Right? That was the real part of the story. And The Crucible is sort of based on that. Okay? That time period is actually the second Red Scare. We did this twice, where we tended to believe that everybody was a communist, and we worked to try to root them out. Okay? This is going to be the first Red Scare, and let's make sure that we understand what the term red means as we get started. Red is a term. It is a nickname used to describe somebody who is a communist. And I think for most of the time, it's particularly referring to Russian communists. All right. So if you notice on question 2, it asks, what is something that happened at the 1917, towards the end of World War I, that sort of prompted all of this fear to develop in Americans? Well, I don't know how many of you took world history. Took world history? Did you have Jay Prue with that? Who'd you have for world history? Mr. Pruitt? Who'd you go? Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot Mr. Ritz. Anyway, if you took world history, I'd like to think that you guys talked about the communist revolution in Russia. If you didn't, I think we really do need to take a second and just refresh that. This is what we're talking about in question 2. Okay? So for hundreds and hundreds of years, Russia has been ruled by a king, but the Russian term for king is czar. And so we've got, centuries worth of these czars that have ruled over Russia. They've ruled very tight-fistedly. I mean, these are, I don't want to go so far as to call them, Hitler-style dictators, but these are absolutely kings in every sense of the word. All right? And I think you could get away with that when you were in the Middle Ages. But as you get into the 1800s, you're starting to see people that are very over that style of government. You know, by that point, the United States has, you know, well and already overthrown our king. So the Russians are still dealing with it. And, you know, the reality of Russia is getting bleaker and bleaker. You've got people starving without work. And in the meantime, the Tsar is living in his palaces, completely out of touch with the people. It's, you know, it's sort of a situation ripe for a revolution. And that's exactly what's going to happen in 1917. Now, how does communism come into play here? Well, the guy who led the revolution is a guy named Lenin. Lenin, Vladimir Lenin. And he is a student of the guy who created socialism, communism, a guy named Karl Marx. Does that name ring a bell? Yikes. Karl Marx, giant beard, German, yeah, no? Nine? Okay, anyway. All right, so Vladimir Lenin is a student of Karl Marx. Right? You know, he studied the guy, and he thinks that this idea of communism would work really well in Russia. He goes back to Russia, and he, you know, this is a system of government that really appeals to the poor worker. And Russia at this point is something like 90% poor worker. Right? So they're definitely drinking this Kool-Aid, and Lenin is able to get these workers to rise up and revolt, and they end up arresting the Tsar. They put him and his family under house arrest. Eventually, they end up executing the entire family, burying their bodies out in the woods, where they're not going to be found until 1991. Okay? And so now we have a communist government in Russia, and not only that, they actually pulled themselves out of World War I, leaving the British and the Americans sort of on their own. So there is not a lot of love being felt towards Russia here in the United States. Right? And what we end up seeing happen is Americans look at Russia and say, you know, they used to be a lot like us. And they used to be our friend. And then here came these Reds. Here came these communists. And overthrew that country. What's to stop that same thing from happening right here? And so we see a lot of Americans become consumed with this fear that communists are coming into this country looking to destabilize us, looking to overthrow and have a similar kind of revolution right here in the United States. And so look, we do this all the time. When we get convinced of something, we start to look for things that prove that this is really going on. Anybody willing to admit that sometimes they do that? Like they're convinced somebody's out to get them, and so then they start to think, I do too. I'm totally guilty of this. All right, you know, this is, I think, a sort of a human function, and that's what we have happening here. It's borderline, I think, paranoia. But we start to see little things and say, oh, there we go. Told you, communists are coming to get us. All right. So question 3 asks, can you give me 2 examples of things that happen that seem, at least, although there's never any evidence to suggest there's a connection, but they seem to suggest that here come the communists. All right? So let's talk about those here real quick. Right? All of these are going to happen within 1919. This is a big year. 1919, we're getting, you know, women almost right there, ready for the right to vote. You know, prohibition is starting to take off. Then we've got these things going on at the same time. So there's a lot of stuff. Walking up. I can't see. There we go. All right. But no, these are all happening in 1919, and the first of which is that we see a series of strikes take place. And somebody help us out. What is a strike again? What? Oh, what do you got? Exactly. It's a form of protest where you simply refuse to work We still have these go on today, right, Bill? Yeah, all the time. I mean, factories a lot of times, but there is, we just got done with a teacher strike out in LA. I mean, this happens all the time. It is, I think some people would say, the number one thing that a worker could do to get what you want. If you're looking for better pay, better insurance, whatever it might be, like this is the one thing that you've got is you. And if you refuse to work, hopefully that can jog, you know, your bosses to get you to do something. Yeah,
Isn't there one going on?
yeah, it's a teacher strike.
Isn't it in like California?
Would I go on a teacher strike? Boy, that's a tough question. I don't know how to answer that.
How would they do this?
Yeah, and that's my problem with it. Is I mean, I feel like I deserve to be paid fairly, but at the same time, I'm committed to teaching you. So I don't know. I don't know what I would do. I will say this though. I feel like teachers are in a slightly different situation. I come from a family of factory workers. They've all participated in a strike at some point. That doesn't make them communists, okay? That means that they're, you know, being treated unfairly in some way, and they're using the one weapon at their disposal to try to bring awareness and hopefully make something better. All right. So anyway, let's talk about a couple of these, just because I think they're wild. Okay. There's one that takes place up in Seattle. Which state's Seattle in? Washington State. All right. Now notice this is called the Seattle General Strike. All right. This is a strike that is going to basically involve every worker in Seattle. Doesn't matter if you're a teacher, plumber, banker, you name the job, and you are likely on strike in Seattle. I mean, that city basically shuts down because you've just got this sort of general workers all involved within this strike. This is a huge deal. Imagine, you know, Indianapolis, where everybody is just not going to work. I mean, that would be basically a shutdown of a city, and that's what you have in Seattle, right? In Boston, you've got the police force that has gone without a raise for close to 20 years at this point. I mean, that's a big deal. And the police officers have finally had enough of it, and so they go on strike. The governor of Massachusetts decides that that's not right, that threatens the public safety of the people in Boston, and so instead of simply giving them a raise, he fires them all. I'm not saying it was a smart move. I'm just saying that's what he does. And so, what do you think? What do you think happens?
What?
You've seen The Purge? No. No. The Purge, Boston, 1990. No. But there is actually mass looting. I mean, burglaries. There is violence in the streets. It really is a bad deal. Now, luckily, you know, they get their raise and they do come back to work. But, I mean, these are just two of these examples that I'm talking about here where you see workers going on strike. Well, this is all happening at around the same time that you've had this workers' revolt. So this must be a communist takeover, when it's really not. It's just workers that finally had it. But that's one of these things that sort of build up. People are convinced, communist takeover, here's our evidence. Another one, and this one is really, really scary. We're going to see a series of mail bombs that are, a few of them are actually going to be sent out. Most of them, though, are going to be caught at the post office. And this just happened last year. I don't know if any of you guys saw this in the news, but there was a guy down in Florida who had mailed out a series of bombs, and he was sending them to different members of the government. Right? A lot of them were addressed to members of the Democratic Party. One was addressed to go to President Obama. You know, luckily they were all found, diffused, neutralized. Nobody got hurt. But you know, you have a very similar situation. Some of these are being sent out to members of the government. There's one being sent to the White House, one being sent to the Capitol building, one was addressed to the Attorney General. All right, so this is a pretty scary looking deal here. You know, they eventually did arrest some people. Again, nothing exploded. All right, you know, nobody got hurt, but it was pretty scary. And so again, people are looking at this and saying, here we go. communists. Now, there's no evidence to suggest that it was, but that's what people are convinced of, right? Now, the one, and this goes into question 4 here, the one that kind of blows my mind, but again, it's something that seems to convince Americans that communists are behind it. We're going to see a massive flu outbreak in 1919. Now, we still deal with the flu every year, and it seems like every year we will have 10, 20 people who will pass away from complications with the flu. Seems like a lot of times it's the elderly or the real young. Go get your flu shots. Okay, but the numbers are pretty small. All right, 1 is too many, but when you compare it to this, guys, this flu epidemic in the United States, I mean, look at that number, 500,000. That is more people than are going to be killed in World War I. And I don't really mean just Americans. I'm talking about those killed in World War I are going to be smaller in number than who died from this flu outbreak in 1919. This is a huge deal. And not only do we have lots of death, but we've got everything that goes with it. Lots of quarantine. People are afraid to leave their homes. This is a really bad deal. And unfortunately, and I don't know how you do this, but Americans are looking for who to blame for this. It's got to be those commies coming over from Russia with their flu, coughing on all of us. Here we go. But you've got a series of events here that are not really related, but they're all happening at the same time, at a time when Americans are already very fearful. So they all seem to contribute to to this scare that's going on here. We see this coming through in the newspapers. A couple of political cartoons. This one may be a little hard for you to see, but you've got obviously the Statue of Liberty. Then you kind of get this guy coming at you. Does he look like an ape to anybody? Well, that's how he's drawn. He's got kind of like an ape face. In one hand, he's got a knife. In the other hand, he's got a bomb. This must be the way that 1919 bombs all look. Like this big bowling ball with a fuse, I don't know. But it's like he's sneaking up behind, and it's really hard to see. But his sort of coat here says European anarchist. These immigrants are coming over. They're all communists. They're all going to attack us. Here, I thought this was a particularly timely cartoon. This is an immigrant coming through, but what he really is a danger. We need to shut that door, close the gate. Now, what happens in response to this? How does the Red Scare kind of hit its tipping point here? I mean, we're going to see this result in the mass deportation of a lot of people from this country. And the guy who's going to sort of lead the charge here is this guy. His name is A. Mitchell Palmer. He's the Attorney General of the United States. And if you can remember, I had said he's one of the guys who had a mail bomb that was mailed to him. So he's like, He is the man in charge of justice within the country. So he's going to use the power at his disposal to order mass arrests, mass deportations on January 2nd of 1921. Just on that day, the United States deported 10,000 people. Stuck them on a boat, sent them back to Europe, sent them back to Russia. These are, people who aren't doing anything, that have come here, they've gone through Ellis Island, they've come here legally, they've done nothing, but since we're in the middle of this big scare, and we're convinced, that everybody is a communist, we're going to arrest them, put them on a boat, we're going to send them back. This is not a highlight for us, but it is a moment where we see fear kind of get the best of us. And unfortunately, we're not done talking about fear this week. All right, we haven't even got into the resurgence of the KKK. Yeah, we got some low points here, all at this time period, and this is just scratching the surface of it. Right? But Red Scare there, that should be questions 1 through 4. Before I say a few things about prohibition, Any questions on what's going on here? Fortunately for us, this sort of wakes a lot of Americans up. That's sort of a shocking number. And after this, we start to see things kind of die down, cool down a little bit. We're going to see things level off. This is only 2 years here that this really gets heated. The second Red Scare that the Crucible is based off of, that's going to be closer to a 30-year. Okay. All right. Prohibition. What do you know about it? I always hear the same word, alcohol. All right. And you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Huh? It is booze, liquor, whatever you want. Hooch. It's just, you never heard it called? Yeah. All right. So here's the deal, guys. Let me hit you with a fact. Okay. Prohibition is without a doubt one of the biggest social experiments that this country will ever undertake. The idea that we can make this country a better place by getting rid of alcohol. Right. Now, it's going to end up being a spectacular fail. Okay? But I always feel like it's important for students to understand that there's a reason why we even attempted this. And I think it can be summed up with this. By 1830, the average 15-year-old, so this would be right around your age, drank over 7 gallons of hard liquor each year. Now, I don't have the visual with me right now, but if you guys have milk at home, that's usually bought in a gallon jug. So fill up a little over 7 of those, and you've got the yearly consumption for an average 15-year-old American in 1830. This is not adults. As you can probably imagine, the number for adults is significantly higher. So understand, please, all jokes aside, even though prohibition is not going to work very well, there is a reason why it was attempted, right? So we're going to go through 2 phases here. We're going to see prohibition kind of get started at around this time before the Civil War. In fact, we talked about this before the Civil War, first semester. All right, we had a station. It was that table right there, Noah Griffiths' table, where we had different flyers and different photographs and things like that talking about what was called the temperance movement. Okay, that is the start to all this. All right, the group that really got this started was called the Women's Christian Temperance Union. This group was founded in Ohio, Hillsdale, Ohio, not too far away from here. And, they're not talking about a ban on alcohol. They're just trying to convince people to slow down. Don't drink as much, especially, the 15-year-old. Okay? Slow down your drinking. That's all we can hope for. Now, what these women would do is a lot of times they would literally stand in the doorway to a bar or to a saloon, lock arms, and be a human barrier so you could not get in to drink. Sure.
Sending Big Mike up.
Well, if they're not in the saloon, then they're on public property. Sure, a lot of times these women were arrested, but they would do it still as sort of a form of protest, as a movement to try to get you to slow down. And it wasn't ultimately very successful, but they get an E for effort. Right? Now we're going to see this progress though into the 1900s, except for at this point the goal is going to change. No longer are we trying to convince you to slow down your drinking. Now, what if we just work to ban it? Right? And, this is a time where, there are a lot of, social ills, a lot of things wrong with this country. And the idea is that a lot of that comes from the fact that we've got so many people that are just always drunk. If we could get them to slow down or to stop drinking altogether, that would help make things better, right? And the group that sort of takes over in the 1900s is a group called the Anti-Saloon League, or the ASL. And now we're going to start to see this be a real legit group. They've got a lot of money behind them. They've got a lot of famous people behind them. And we're going to start to see them launch a campaign, put that money to use to put pressure on Congress to pass a law which will ban alcohol. All right, some photographs here of them in action. All right, a lot of these parades going through the street. All right, vote dry, vote for the alcohol ban. The ladies are still at work here. Lips that touch liquor shall not touch ours. Yeah. So question number 5 says, we're not to the answer yet, Rachel. Yeah, so it's okay. Question 5 asks 2 actual laws that are passed that will ban alcohol. We're not to that yet. We're just kind of building up to it. Right? So groups like the Anti-Saloon League are working for a law to be passed, which will happen in 1919. Right? We're going to see 2 laws. So question number 5 asks for 2 laws. Here they are. Okay? First, we're going to see something called the Volstead Act passed. Okay, this is going to be a ban on the manufacture, the transportation, and the sale of beer and wine. All right. Now that had some effect to it, but it didn't quite have the impact that they were hoping for. Because if you were making something outside of beer and wine, say whiskey, right, you could theoretically still make it. What they wanted to see, groups like the ASL, was a nationwide ban on alcohol, period. And I think this is really saying something, guys. Again, even though prohibition fails, we have to understand that at the time, it had a lot of widespread support. You cannot amend the Constitution without that. It takes more than a smile to amend the Constitution. The Constitution bans, again, the manufacturing or the making of it, the transportation, and the sale of alcohol. Period. Now, question 6 asks you, what specific action regarding alcohol did neither of these laws ban? Drinking it. That was not banned. All right, so what happened here is the U.S. government set a date and said, on this date, you are no longer able to make it or to sell it. But if you already have it before that date, it's yours. We can't do anything about it. So what do you think Americans did leading up to that date? Let's hoard it. All right, we had places, and I've seen some of these photographs, to the ceiling, 8-9 rows deep, boxes of alcohol. Because if you had it already, it was perfectly legal to drink it. There were other loopholes here. For example, doctors could write you a prescription for certain alcohols. And as long as you had that prescription, you could actually get alcohol over the counter. So, as you might imagine, some doctors who didn't quite have the sound moral structure of others made a nice little fortune by writing fake prescriptions. All right? That's the biggest reason why this fails, right? Is that people just keep on drinking. And not only that, they keep on making it. All right? Bootleggers, I mean, heck, NASCAR wouldn't exist without prohibition. All right? People used to, make out illegal alcohol, throw in the back of the vehicle, and they would outrun the cops. And that was the origins of NASCAR. Right? So the fact that people kept using it meant that it was going to go away pretty quick, right? I wanted to show you some of these photographs. There's nothing to write here. Show you some of these photographs as we wrap things up here. Okay, this was the attitude, guys. Read this. This was the attitude when Prohibition began. The reign of tears is over. The slums will soon be only a memory. We will turn our prisons into factories. Men will walk upright. Women will smile. Children will laugh. Hell will be forever for rent. All because we banned alcohol. Okay? Everybody's going to be good now. So here's the reality of Prohibition. We're just going to hide it. The garter belt was very popular at this time. I showed you the photograph of the parade where people had the signs that were saying, vote dry, vote dry. Show you a photograph here in just a minute. Signs have changed. Now it says, we want beer. All right. You're going to start to see very secretive bars. What were they called? Speakeasies. That picture down there in the bottom right was taken the night that Prohibition came to an end. I love this photograph to the right here. All right, this is a sign inside a bar. In compliance with the 18th Amendment, no intoxicating liquor will be allowed. Being held by a group of people who are holding a ton of liquor. All right, so the impact here is going to be pretty slow, pretty small. But again, short of, like making fun of this for such a failure, understand why it was attempted in the first place. That's pretty key. All right. So I want to show you guys this clip. We're going to watch this through the end of the period. It's going to give you some of a little bit more depth to Prohibition and what's going on. I'm going to ask, don't do it now, but while you're leaving the class, make sure your name is on it. Turn these questions in the back. Because we couldn't give it up.
I was watching this. Who Wants to Become a Billionaire? There was a question about Prohibition. It
Yeah.
lasted 13 years.
Yeah, we just weren't willing to give up on it. Okay, so let's. This was filmed at a time, guys. Listen, this was filmed at a time where we still have a lot of Americans that are alive. Most of these people were kids when Prohibition was going on, but they may have seen their dad, their family making money by producing illegal alcohol. In fact, my family and I were down southern Indiana this summer at Spring Mill State Park, and they have a bunch of caves down there. We went into a cave, and in one of the cave rooms, that was where bootleggers had set up stills and were producing illegal alcohol. All right, why would you do it? Because you could make a ton of money off of selling that stuff. So this is actually going to start. This clip here is going to start with a guy talking about what he remembers from his dad producing alcohol.